Book right here. This is Irresistible by Adam Alter. So that's the book that this lecture comes from. So let's go ahead and get started. There we go. Oops, I'm at the wrong end. Okay. The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked by Adam Alter. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple Computers, once told a reporter that he wouldn't let his children use an iPad. We limit how much technology our children use in the home, he said. And there's his children with his wife and Steve Jobs. Chris Anderson of the technology magazine Wired once said, "We enforce strict time limits on every device in the house because we have seen the dangers of technology firsthand." Anderson's 5 children were never allowed to use screens in their bedrooms. Evan Williams, the founder of Blogger, Twitter, and Medium, thought his 2 young sons hundreds of books, but refused to allow them to have an iPad. And that's Evan Williams with his 2 sons. Leslie Gold of Sutherland Gold Group, she was the founder of the Sutherland Gold Analytics Group, imposed a strict no screen time during the week rule on her children. She softened her stance once when they needed computers for schoolwork. Instagram, like so many other social media platforms, is bottomless. Facebook has no endless feed. Netflix automatically moves on to the next episode in a series. I just witnessed this. Tinder encourages users to keep swiping in search of a better option. Users benefit from these apps and websites, but also struggle to use them in moderation. According to Tristan Harris, a design ethicist, the problem isn't that people lack willpower, it's that there are 1,000 people on the other side of the screen whose job it is to break down the self-regulation that you have. And this, of course, is Tristan Harris. In the 1960s, we swam through waters with only a few sharks, cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs that were expensive and generally inaccessible. In the 2010s, those same waters are littered with sharks. There's the Facebook shark, the Instagram shark, the porn shark, the email shark, the online shopping shark. In 2004, Facebook was fun. In 2023, it's addictive. According to clinical psychologists from areas where the internet has been pervasive since it was developed, every single person I work with has at least one behavioral addiction. I have patients who fit into every area: gambling, shopping, social media, email, and so on. It's much easier to hide behavioral addictions, much more so than for substance abuse. This makes them dangerous because they go unnoticed for years. This is a case study. One accomplished patient managed to hide her Facebook addiction from her friends. She went through a horrible breakup and then stalked her ex-boyfriend online for years. With Facebook, it's far more difficult to make a clean break when a relationship ends. One male patient checked his email hundreds of times a day. He's incapable of relaxing and enjoying himself on vacation, but you'd never know. He's deeply anxious but presents so well in the world. He has a successful career in the healthcare industry, and you'd never know how much he suffers. The impact of social media has been huge. Social media has completely shaped the brains of younger people I work with. One thing I am often mindful of in a session is this: I could be 5 or 10 minutes into a conversation with a young person about an argument that they have had with a friend or girlfriend when I remember to ask whether this happened face to face, by text, or on social media. More often, the answer is text or social media. Yet in the telling of their story, this isn't apparent to me. It sounds like what I would consider a real face to face conversation. This person doesn't differentiate various modes of communication the way that I do. The result is a landscape filled with disconnection and addiction. Behavioral addiction consists of 6 ingredients: compelling goals that are just beyond reach, irresistible and unpredictable positive feedback, a sense of incremental progress and improvement, tasks that become slowly more difficult over time, unresolved tensions that demand resolution, strong social connections. Instagram is addictive because some photos attract many likes while others fall short. Users chase the next big hit or likes by posting one photo after the other and return to the site regularly to support their friends. Gamers play certain games for days on end because they're driven to complete missions and because they've formed strong social ties that bind them to other gamers. Millions of recovering alcoholics manage to avoid bars altogether, but recovering from internet addicts are forced to use email. You can't apply for a travel visa or job or begin working without an email address. Fewer and fewer modern jobs allow you to avoid using computers and smartphones. Abstinence isn't an option. You can confine addictive experiences to one corner of your life while courting good habits that promote healthy behaviors. The app Moment tracks daily random screen usage. It stops tracking when you're listening to music or making phone calls. Most people estimate 50% less browsing than they actually use. The author estimated that he was picking up his phone 10 times a day and spent an hour a day browsing. He was looking at his phone an average of 40 times a day and spending 3 hours a day browsing. And this is the symbol for Moment. When Moment was first introduced, experts decided that 1 hour of browsing a day should be the target for most people outside of work. It was discovered that 88% of people using the app reported over 1 hour of browsing a day, with most averaging around 4 hours, making smartphone browsing the most time-consuming daily activity after sleep. And this is, once again, Honey Boo Boo. 2013 research showed that phones are disrupted by their mere existence even when they aren't in active use. The researchers speculated that they are distracting because they remind the individual that there is an active world outside the immediate conversation, and they represent FOMO, fear of missing out. The phenomenon known as the fear of missing out factor is central to everything from the development of a pathological internet addiction to the adverse disruption of sleep patterns and the associated side effects, both psychological and social. It also describes a generalized anxiety and state of persistent but irrational apprehension that has its roots in the inevitably narcissistic framework of social media to impel one of two related behaviors: disordered narcissism or homicidal psychopathology. There's one game that professional gamers will stay away from because of its addictive properties: World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft may be one of the most addictive behavioral experiences on the planet. Almost half of all players consider themselves addicted. More than 250,000 people have taken the free online World of Warcraft addiction test. In 10 years, the game has grossed more than $10 billion and attracted more than 100 million subscribers. If they formed a nation, it would be the 12th biggest on Earth. The 12th biggest nation on Earth. Bigger than Canada. Games like World of Warcraft attract millions of teens and young adults, and up to 40% develop addictions. Near Seattle is an addiction center specifically for male gamers named Restart. An attempt to admit females resulted in transference of gaming addiction to sex addiction for both vulnerable genders. And this is what Restart looks like. A meta-analysis of 83 studies on behavioral addiction disclosed that 41% of the population has at least one behavioral addiction over the past 12 months that include gambling, love, sex, shopping, the internet, exercise, work addictions, alcohol, nicotine, and narcotics. 41% of the population. A recent study suggested that up to 40% of the population suffers from some form of internet-based addiction, whether to email, gaming, or porn. Another study found that 48% of U.S. university students were internet addicts, and another 40% were borderline or potential addicts. That's 88%. 46% of people say they couldn't live without their smartphones. Some would rather suffer physical injury than an injury to their phones. And 80% of teens check their phones at least once an hour. In 2008, adults spent an average of 18 minutes on their phones per day. In 2015, they were spending 2 hours and 48 minutes per day. In 2008, it was 18 minutes, and now it's 2 hours and 48 minutes. Up to 59% of people say they are dependent on social media sites and that their reliance on these sites ultimately makes them unhappy. Half of these people say that they feel compelled to check these sites at least once an hour, longer than that, and they become anxious, agitated, and unable to concentrate. In 2000, the average human attention span was 12 seconds. By 2013, the average attention span had dropped to 8 seconds. A goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds, and humans have an attention span of 8 seconds. 77% of 18 to 24-year-olds admitted that they reach for their phones before anything else when nothing is happening. 87% said they often zoned out, watching TV episodes back to back. It's easy on Netflix because you've got about 15 seconds before the next episode comes on. DNA evidence suggests that Neanderthals carried a gene called DRD47R as long as 40,000 years ago. DRD47R is responsible for constellations of behaviors that set Neanderthals apart from earlier hominids, including risk-taking, novelty-seeking, and sensation-seeking, and that may be one of the reasons why humans left Africa. They were risk-taking, novelty-seeking, and sensation-seeking. They became wanderers. Where pre-Neanderthal hominids were timid and risk-averse, Neanderthals were constantly exploring and rarely satisfied. A variant of DRD47R, known as DRD4R, is still present in about 10% of the population, who are far more likely to be daredevils and serial addicts. Researchers have shown that infants instinctively follow their parents' eyes. Distracted parents cultivate distracted children because parents who can't focus teach their children the same attentional patterns. The ability of children to sustain attention is known as a strong indicator or later success in areas such as language acquisition, problem solving, and other key development milestones. Caregivers who appear distracted or whose eyes wander a lot while their children play appear to negatively impact infants' burgeoning attention spans during a key stage of development. There is a modern-day malady that affects 2/3 of all adults. Its symptoms include heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, appetite suppression, poor weight control, weakened immune functioning, lowered resistance to disease, higher pain sensitivity, slower reaction times, mood fluctuations, depressed brain functioning, depression, obesity, diabetes, and certain forms of cancer. The malady is chronic sleep deprivation that is rising due to the increase of smartphones, e-readers, and other light-emitting devices. 95% of adults use an electronic device that emits light in the hour before bed, and more than half of them check their emails overnight. 60% of adults between 18 and 64 keep their phones next to them when they sleep, which might explain why 50% of adults claim they don't sleep well, because they are always connected to technology. Sleep quality has declined dramatically in the past half century, particularly over the past 2 decades. And one of the major culprits is the bluish light that emanates from many of these electronic devices. When blue light hits the back of an individual's eyes, the pineal gland stops producing melatonin. Researchers found that in the presence of blue light, people produce less melatonin. They sleep more poorly and they feel more tired. Researchers looking at addicts found that they didn't like the drugs that they were taking. They wanted the drugs that they were taking, even as they grew to dislike them for destroying their lives. It's not easy to disrupt the activation of an intense want. Even as you come to hate an addiction for ruining your life, your brain continues to want the behavior. Even as you come to loathe Facebook and Instagram for consuming too much of your time, you continue to want updates as much as you did when they were still making you happy. One recent study suggests that playing hard to get has the same addictive effect. An unattainable romantic partner is less likable but more desirable, which explains why some people find emotionally unavailable partners alluring. Loving the wrong person is so common that we have stereotypes for the guy who's no good and the femme fatale. We know they're no good for us, but we can't help wanting them. Wow, he's juggling her heart like a hacky sack. When a gaming addict fires up his laptop, his dopamine level spikes just like a drug addict using his drugs. When an exercise addict laces up her running shoes, his dopamine level spikes just like with a drug addict using his drugs. 70% of office emails are read within 6 seconds of arrival. This involves the average worker to disrupt whatever they are doing to open their email program and click on the incoming mail. In one study, researchers found that 45% of respondents associated emails with a loss of control. One technology executive opined, "I wonder if this virtual reality world you dive into is almost superior to the actual world you're in. Instead of having humans interactions, I can just go into this VR world and do VR things, and that's going to be my life." Now, if you remember, Facebook is not Facebook anymore, it's Meta. And that's because Mark Zuckerberg decided that he was going to create a virtual world. And he named it Meta. And that's the reason he renamed Facebook, because he was trying to create a virtual world. He thought everyone would adopt an icon, an avatar. He wanted everybody to adapt an avatar. Well, it hasn't worked out that way, but there is still the desire to do that. According to a clinical psychologist who routinely works with social media addicts, there's nothing wrong with making friends online as long as the individual has friends in the real world. Sitting with good friends releases a whole bouquet of neurochemicals that keeps us each regulated emotionally and physiologically. According to the same psychologist, the addictive online friendships that attract young gamers are dangerous, and not for what they provide, but for what they can't provide. A chance to learn what it means to sit face to face as you maintain a conversation with another person. Even the smell of another person, the constant eye contact that comes from being in the same room, is important. People who communicate by webcam never seem to look one another in the eyes because the other person's eyes aren't perfectly aligned with the webcam that conveys your gaze. Remember, once your cucumber brain has become pickled, it can never go back to being a cucumber. I like that. once your cucumber brain has become pickled, it can never go back to being a cucumber. Addictive games have 3 critical elements: immersion, achievement, and social element. Immersion, the sense that you are embedded in the game. Achievement, the sense that you are achieving something. And the social element, by far the most important element. High-speed internet connections have made it easier to communicate with other players in real time. Children reared on the internet suffer a kind of emotional amblyopia. Children develop amblyopia is where you've got walleye. Children develop different mental skills at different ages during critical periods. Amblyopia you might call it walleye. It's where one eye sees in one direction and the other eye is looking in another direction. There is a critical period for learning social skills and for learning how to navigate the complex world of teenage sexuality. If kids miss out on the chance to interact face to face, there's a fair chance they'll never acquire those skills. Clinical psychologists have seen a marked increase of male gamers who had no problem interacting with peers online, but can't carry a conversation with someone sitting across from them. How can you learn to talk and flirt and date and end up in bed if you've never mixed with other people online? Gamer guys get sidetracked and they develop intimacy disorders. They don't have the skill to bring sexuality and intimacy together. Many of them turn to pornography instead of forming real relationships, and they never seem to understand true intimacy. I'm going to give you some strange statistics now. The two most connected worlds are Japan and South Korea. South Korea has the lowest population rate in the world. It's like 1.23. In other words, they're not reproducing themselves. And in order to maintain a zero population growth, you need to produce about 2.23 individuals per couple, and Korea is producing children at a 1.23. The other is Japan. Japan has the has the distinction of having more virgins than adult virgins than any other country. 25% of 30-year-olds in Japan, this is males and females, are virgins. They've never had sex. 25%, 1/4 of the population over 30 or under 30. By the age of 30, they've never had sex. Two most technological countries in the world, Japan and South Korea. One study found that gamers aged 10 to 15 years, and I see the same thing happening in the United States. You can imagine if I was talking to a former student of mine the other day, and I asked him, well, have you ever been attracted to anybody? And he said, no, he's never been attracted to anybody. He's 37 years old. Does he play video games? That's not really his problem. His problem is that he thinks that he needs to establish himself. He needs to find a good job before he can get married. So he's always never thought in that direction, as weird as that sounds. And the same thing's going to happen in the United States. You've got all these males, you've got all these females that are doing things online, watching TikTok, doing Instagram. They don't have any lives of their own. So they're doing something else. What they're doing is watching pornography and masturbating. Will they ever be intimate with somebody else? It's a lot easier not to. Putting yourself out there and trying to date somebody is fairly anxiety producing. Is that what we're going to see in the future? I'm afraid that might be it. We may be going the route of the dinosaur, the route of the South Koreans and the Japanese. Not just in the United States, of course, but also in Europe. Any place that's technologically superior. What's the most popular thing on the internet? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? No, it's pornography. One study found that gamers aged 10 to 15 years who played more than 3 hours per day were less satisfied with their lives, less likely to feel empathy toward other people, and less likely to know how to deal with emotions appropriately. 3 hours may sound like a lot, but recent surveys have shown that kids spend an average of 5 to 7 hours in front of screens each day. 5 to 7 hours. When today's millennials become adults, there's a fair chance their social cucumber brain will be pickled. The average school child between 8 and 18 years old spends 1/3 of their life sleeping, 1/3 at school, and 1/3 engrossed in new social media, from smartphones and tablets to TVs and laptops. They spend more time communicating through screens than they do with other people directly face to face. Since the turn of the new millennium, the rate of non-screen playtime fell 20%, while the rate of screen playtime increased by a similar amount. I never see children outside playing, ever. I drive between here and wherever. No, there's nobody outside. No kids, no adults. They're all inside. In the summertime, in the spring, in the fall, in the winter, there's nobody outside. Hardship inoculation is the idea that struggling with a mental puzzle inoculates you against further mental hardships, just as vaccinations inoculate you against illness. Reading a book is harder than watching TV. Young adults do much better on tricky mental puzzles when they've solved difficult rather than easy ones earlier. Relying too heavily on tech leads to a phenomenon known as digital amnesia. 91% of the respondents on the survey described their phones as extensions of their brains. The majority said they would search online for answers to questions before trying to generate the answer from memory. And 70% said they would feel sadness or panic if they lost their smartphone devices, even briefly. And now we have AI, and AI is going to give us all the answers. Only we won't know how to ask the questions. One of the things to think about. You need intelligence in order to ask the right question and to get the right answer. There are more than 400 treatment centers in China, according to the country's definition of internet addiction, with more than 24 million teen internet addicts. Chinese counselors notice their teenage clients have a bias towards virtual reality. They think the real world isn't as good as the virtual world. Our research shows that addicts spend more than 6 hours a day online, not for the purpose of work or studying. Some kids are so hooked on these games that they think going to the bathroom will affect their performance. So they wear a diaper. They wear a diaper. They crave and look forward to playing every day. One of the biggest problems among these kids is loneliness. I think it is because they're the only child in the family. And as parents, we fail to make friends with our children. We only ask them to study hard. Their stress, their worries, their pain, we can't see any of it. We care only about their studies. So where do they look for their friends? The virtual world has all sorts of grand audio and visual extravaganzas. It becomes their best friend. In dealing with social media addiction, many sufferers have a problem admitting that they have a problem. The first task, as in any addictive treatment, is to make them realize that they are addicts. The next task is to get them to reframe some of the harmful ideas that lead them to overuse the internet, such as getting them to re-engage with the real world that many have abandoned in favor of an online world that seems more forgiving. A typical session would begin with a readiness ruler. On a scale of 0 to 10, if 0 is not the least bit ready to change your behavior and 10 is as fired up as you can be, where are you? This is cognitive behavioral therapy. The following conversation will involve the answer to the readiness rule. Why is the number so high or low? A low response will indicate that they don't see any need to change their behavior. A high response shows that they admit that their Instagram account is making them unhappy. What are the benefits of your Instagram use? How would you like things to be different? How does your Instagram use affect your well-being? In what ways do you feel you could be doing better? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Getting started, I'm not here to preach to you or tell you what you should do. How would I know? It's your life and not mine. I believe that people know what's best for them. I don't have an agenda, just a goal to see if there is anything about the way you take care of your health that you would like to change, and if so, to see if I can help you get there. How does that sound? This is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not what you think. You might imagine that people in the Libertine Northeast and Northwest states spend more time consuming porn on the internet, but the reverse is true. Are you ready for this? People from the conservative states with traditional views of sexuality are more likely to subscribe to online pornography services. It is the people who are forced to exercise willpower who fall first. Those who avoid temptation in the first place tend to do much better. Recent studies have shown that merely looking at an illuminated screen shortly before bed severely hampers your ability to sleep deeply. There are two ways to approach behavioral addictions: eliminate them or harness them. It's possible to channel the forces that drive harmful behavioral addiction for good. The same tendency that can destroy us can prepare us to do good. Eat better, exercise more, work smarter, behave more generously, and save more money. 60% of the world's developed population is overweight or obese, including 67% of Americans, 66% of New Zealanders, 65% of Norwegians, 61% of Brits, 61% of Germans, and 61% of Australians. Graduation rates in the United States are declining at every education level. So we have plenty of room for improvement. And that is the end of that. So, there we are. Okay, so, okay. I'll see you guys next time. I know this was some pretty bad news. Pretty ugly stuff. It's not going to get any better, I can assure you. Because we're talking about AI, we're talking about social media, we're talking about gaming, and we're also talking about pornography. But actually, I'm not going to pick on pornography very much, mainly because there's not a whole lot written out there, and this is all changing so rapidly that no one has written about it yet. There are no books about this. There's no research because things are getting worse at an increasingly rapid rate. So this is a really serious problem that, well, Japan has, of course. I told you the statistics on Japan, and I told you the statistics on South Korea. China, of course, is trying to deal with it with all the by stating that this is an addiction, that this needs to change. So I'll talk to you guys next week. Yeah, we have spring break, so okay. Have a good spring break. Have a safe spring break.